Each year, thousands of leaders, innovators, and forward thinkers gather at Workday Rising to explore what's next in the changing world of work. We've unlocked the vaults on our most impactful conversations, and we're bringing them directly to you. We dove deep into the strategies and insights shaping our collective future, so prepare to be inspired, challenged, and empowered to make a change. This is the Future of Work podcast, recorded live at Workday Rising.
Hi, everyone. I'm Pham, Vice President of AI here at Workday. Thank you so much for joining me live at Workday Rising in beautiful San Francisco. I am so thrilled to be joined today by a legendary leader, the former Chief Human Resource Officer at IBM, responsible for introducing AI into HR at IBM, and the current board member of a number of organizations, including TechWolf, Centivo, and Kraft Heinz. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here, Kathy.
I'm so thrilled to have you. We'll be diving into how AI can amplify human ingenuity, unlocking new levels of innovation and empowerment. So, our research at Workday reveals that as people gain direct experience with AI, their trust with the technology significantly increases. What do you think are the critical boundaries that organizations can build to build confidence with AI?
Yeah, so look, I think that the research is about the first phase, mostly, right? Which is where it's work augmentation.
Yep.
And what's there not to love, right? There's your tedious work gets taken away from you and you get to spend more time on the stuff that you enjoy. It's something that is, in terms of a return on investment, the investment is mostly coming to the employee because they now have more reflection time, and can spend their days in ways that give them more agency, right? So all of those things are good. I think the question, back to your boundaries, is, and I think everyone's understanding it, is where we go next, right? This was a lovely period that we're going through, but are we going to be replacing my job? And what does that mean for me? And so that's the part that when we talk about boundaries, we need to be really clear about. Why are we using AI? What are the business problems we're trying to solve with it?
Right.
And be transparent about what that means for jobs. Involve them in the redefinition of the workflow.
Can you dive into that part? Because how do you involve your employees into this process of rethinking the workflow?
You know, it's really quite simple. It's sitting down with them and saying, let's look at how the work is getting done, and let's capture where things aren't going as well as they should.
Right.
There was a great case I read on Zapier where the CEO did that with her customer service folks and said, look, we need to scale. Just by adding, VC people always want you to scale, right? This is a software company. If we want to scale, we can't just keep adding customer service reps. Let's look at how we can use AI. And what they discovered wasn't really that the problem was that the customer service reps weren't able to increase their productivity with AI. That was going to be helpful. But the big issue actually was the interaction with the engineers who designed the systems. And so they reconfigured the work organization so that there was an engineer on call, so that they could answer customer questions and so forth. And so the NPS score went up, and they were able to leverage AI. But it's looking at the broader workflow, not just how do we replace this job, the customer service rep, but how do we improve, the NPS score, right? The net promoter score. So those are the sorts of things that, if you look at the broader picture, you involve the employees, look at the whole workflow, then you get a different answer.
Yeah. That's such a great example where you really got to where you need to go by talking to sales rep, but then also pulling in engineering and really understanding the whole flow versus just one very small part of that.
And it makes the jobs more meaningful, right? It ups their skills, right? And so you're getting a different answer. I know P&G did the same thing with research, right? They thought they would leverage AI with research, but what they ended up doing was realizing it needed a better connection with the commercial side. And so their impact was that they actually had more commercial ideas coming out of research because they better understood what was going on in the commercial side. And the commercial side understood, gave better ideas, but also understood better the constraints on the development side. So in the end, you get a higher performing company, but you also get jobs that are more meaningful.
Right. It's so great to hear you share these examples from companies like yours with IBM, but like and P&G, these very iconic companies who figured out how to move forward by really understanding what their employees need. You mentioned NPS score.
Yeah.
How do you think about return on investment, both for the company and for the employee, and where they might converge, but also where they might diverge?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really important question. There's a lot of debate about that right now. For example, the 4-day work week. Well, okay, so do we need 5 days, right? Maybe the AI is going to give us back a day's worth of work that people can invest with their families or invest in their training or something like that. The idea of the 5-day work week came from industrialization, right? Where we had standardization and we needed to do that. But now we're in a different world and we need to rethink those rules, and companies that do that will get a differentiation.
Yeah. You wrote a piece, you made me think of a piece you wrote recently and talking about like industrialization and learning from the past.
Yeah.
A bit about Taylorism. Can you talk about how that ties into this?
Yeah, well, I think this is a moment just like the moment that was being faced by factories in the early 20th century, which was, initially people worked in guilds, right? They were craftsmen, they worked in guilds. It was a small environment, and they were responsible for the whole thing. You're making a shoe, you cut the leather, you do the soles, you attach the soles, you do the whole thing, and you have pride in your work, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone does it a little differently, but they learn from a master. They have apprentices and so forth. Then they went into the factory and they kind of worked in the same way at first, and productivity stalled.
Right.
So all of the gains from the productivity really went to the worker, but they had better tools. And it wasn't until Taylor appeared on the scene, Frederick Winslow Taylor, with his scientific management, that he studied the time and motion of how everyone did their work and said, aha, if we could just micro task this and give everyone a very small piece of that, making that shoe, and do it over and over and over again in a standardized way, we will have productivity. And so there we got the assembly line. Jobs that lost meaning, jobs that lost pride, jobs that lost identity. And so the question is, are we going to do the same thing with white collar work? Now that automation, now that AI is coming to white collar work, are we going to end up with something similar? And I'm concerned because I look at the new jobs that are getting created as entry level jobs, for example, are disappearing. And they tend to be babysitting AI, right? They're doing things like, AI prompting, right? Prompt engineers, or AI auditing, or quality, or AI training, or labeling. All of these things aren't necessarily what someone went to college to do, right? They want to be journalists, they want to be lawyers, whatever. But now they're babysitting AI. And is that deepening their mastery as professionals?
Yeah.
Is it preparing them for leadership roles?
Yeah. Such important topics of understanding, going from our skills to mastery and understanding leadership roles, but really leaning on these historical ideas like Taylorism to help us understand these moments. That's such a powerful example. So we have a concept that we didn't completely come up with, but our own CEO of HiredScore, Athena Karp, has brought up, which is the chief work officer, this idea of a chief work officer. It's a shift in mindset. It's a way for leaders to really just rethink and just redesign work in this era of AI, and what risks do organizations take if they don't shift to this mindset of a chief work officer. How do you think about that?
I love it. I mean, it's really where the world is going. We've got to rethink the architecture of work because it was designed for a different era.
Yeah.
We need a methodology to do that. We need principles. We need agreement on how we're going to go about making the change. All of those things take leadership, and it takes a single voice, right? To be able to say, this is how we're going to get it done.
Where do you think, so let's say we have a chief work officer mindset, you have leaders in place. Where do you think we are in our adoption of AI? Are we in the early phases? Are we in later phases? Is there more opportunity from your vast experience and what you've seen? And where do you think?
Well, I had the advantage of using AI right back in 2015.
Yeah.
And so I really had a chance to learn kind of what these phases look like. And at first it was all very exciting. And then we stopped and we said, just because we can doesn't mean we should.
Yes.
And that was a really important moment. We were like, well, what's it doing to employees' sense of privacy? Where are the barriers here? How transparent should we be about how we got to this decision? All of these things started to become real for us. And I'm seeing that happen now. But there's just so much giddiness, all right? I see a lot of giddiness. I read an article on Business Insider about how we no longer need managers because AI can manage the work. And I thought, you have to go from first principles. Why do we have managers? Do we need them? If we do, why?
Yes. Going back to even just asking the question of, if we think we don't need a certain role, why do we need that role and for what purpose?
On it. We do.
Yeah.
Is it for the emotional connectivity? Is it for the I've got your back? The AI can't do those things.
Right.
But if it's to manage the work logistically and so forth, finding bottlenecks, fine. Question about middle management, right? I've seen people say, end of middle management.
Right.
Because after all, AI can filter all of the data and put it together in reports for senior management to look at. Well, really, is that why we have middle managers? Or is there something different around being able to give strategic context and so forth? But until you actually sit down and define what the purpose is, if they should exist, and if so, what is the purpose, you end up in a situation where you get a bit giddy and say, well, we'll just get rid of it all.
Yeah. I love your take on the giddiness of this. But also to your point of when we understand, you said the purpose of middle managers, but also to what you were saying earlier, if you break down the role, like the different parts of that job, what are all the pieces that individual does? And then you can really understand how to bring that together. So building on that, you mentioned different skills that a manager has, for example. What are some of the uniquely human skills you think are most critical right now?
Yeah. So look, I'm actually an advisor to an organization that does coaching, AI coaching. And I have to admit that the work is phenomenal, right? It really helps somebody coach somebody in their work. So managers can get away with not doing as much coaching if their employee is getting coaching. I completely get that. But at the end of the day, who's there for you in the organization? Who's the person that doesn't just process what you're saying, but understands what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
AI can process it. AI doesn't understand it, right? And there's a big difference when you're dealing with an emotional issue, when you're dealing with an issue of conflict and so forth. You need somebody there for that. I do think the whole idea of career progression, having somebody involved in the broader work of the enterprise is helpful for somebody who is, looking out for their career. Those are things that AI can't do.
Right.
But we need to rethink all of it, right? Yeah. We need to really, because some of the work can be overtaken by AI.
When you brought up coaching, you actually made me think of, so I coach youth soccer.
Yeah.
And if you're only looking for a coach who only coaches the soccer skills.
Right.
Then you might have a thing where you're like, I'm going to bring something along that only gives you these skills. And yes, you check that box off, but a good coach also builds confidence and helps you understand how to get through conflict and all these things. And to your point, these other things that a manager, like what is the point of a manager?
And how do you operate as a team?
Yes, all of that.
Observing how you operate as a team. All an AI can do is hear what was written perhaps, or what you told them about how you're operating as a team. Yeah. But the manager actually has a very different, and the coach has a very different view of that.
What are you most excited about and optimistic about with any kind of human, people, AI collaboration? I'll just bring you up again. You brought AI to HR IBM, just one of the most iconic companies of our time, which is a huge feat. So you've seen different iterations of this. So what are you most optimistic about?
Well, look, I mentioned this whole idea of the chief work officer, right? And having to have a methodology for design. And I think we've got it in pieces. But it needs to be connected with talent strategy.
Yes.
Like, for example, if we're not going to have entry-level jobs, where we're going to get our future leaders from, or our middle-ranked jobs and so forth. So there's a methodology that is still missing. And I'm very optimistic that collectively we will come up with it. I don't think it exists today. I think there are pieces of it. But I'm one of the things that I was thinking about, because I was looking at your background, was you remember the Agile Manifesto?
Yes.
Right? That came because the waterfall approach to software development wasn't doing the work, right? It wasn't fast enough. It wasn't responsive enough to user concerns and so forth. Something like that could be happening in the world of the leader of work.
What kind of new manifesto you think should we have?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's up to us to figure that out, right?
Yeah. I love that example because the Agile Manifesto really changed how we do software development everywhere. And it really only came out in 2000 or 2001. It's not that old.
Right.
And so we can come up with a totally new manifesto for design and AI systems that we build towards.
It can be done organically with the best minds working on it. And this is how it worked for the Agile Manifesto. And I have a lot of confidence that we'll figure this out for organization and work design.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing so many insights and wisdom from your time and leadership in this space. Thank you so much for joining us here at Workday Rising. Special thank you again to Diane for joining us. I feel so privileged to get to talk to you. Hopefully you've gained insights into how organizations can use AI not only not to replace our human capabilities, but to really amplify them. When we view AI as a collaborative partner instead of just a boss, we can unlock new ways of elevating our human potential and driving innovation. Thanks again for joining us live, and stay tuned for more insights from leaders here at Workday Rising.